himself, going to be eating a shock dart, but he's able to makes it.
Win anything. Sam, defend your team, because they haven't won.
Strap yourselves in, it's another 1 hour episode.
Oh, yeah.
Spike defused.
All right! Welcome to Press Forward or Defused, your weekly source for Valorant esports news and discussion. We got a very special guest here whose internet has just started cooperating to allow him to attend. Welcome, Anderzz, regular guest of the show, major friend of the show. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Doing all right, keeping busy. So nice to talk some crazy stuff with these events that's been going on the last couple of days.
And, of course, we've got Paul and myself as usual suspects. Sam off casting one of those dang VRLs, so she's been yoinked away this week. Yeah, I mean, you're saying keeping busy. Are you? Do you want to give us any little update on the personal coaching search, that kind of thing? What's next for Anderzz?
I mean, something will get announced fairly soonish.
Oh yeah.
Ooh. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's all I can give you for now. But
would it be something North American?
Maybe.
Geographically, are you feeling this time zone-ish or another time zone-ish?
I'm not jumping more than 8 hours from my time zone anymore. So
more than 8, but if you're East Coast, that could be 7, and you're coaching a Britain team. So
no, that's
good dodge
5.
there.
You
Good
don't
dodge.
Time zones. East Coast to the UK is just 5 hours. Central Europe is 6 hours. And then, so you could be all the way into CIS at that point. That tells us nothing.
Anderzz, the Gambit coach, confirmed. You heard it here first on Press Forward.
Not coaching Oceania and Asia, folks. We've got the scoop. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on. Won't pressure you more for that. But we should be looking for an announcement of a new Anderzz coaching gig. That's good to know.
Yes. I don't think it's going to be like in the next week or so, but I mean, it'll be next couple of weeks type deal.
Nice.
Interesting. All right. So that's going to be spicy. I'm sure we'll be talking about that news whenever that news does come out. But speaking about talking about the news, here's our Run It Back segment where we talk about the news from the last week. Not as much now as we're kind of into the thick of things with VCT. Yeah. And if you're making roster changes right now, we probably already knew them. Soar's got their new roster. Epathy, Stellar, Physic, Vic, and Trill. Trainer in as the head coach. This is some elements of the old Luminosity team, especially with Trainer in there as well. How we feeling about this? Got any thoughts, Anderzz?
I mean, it's a solid lineup. It's one of those teams where, like you said, it has a lot of the sort of echoes of Luminosity's past. And I feel like you give a team like that, an organization like SOAR that doesn't necessarily have the from outside of Valorant punching power and notoriety that Luminosity has, and it's going to make them a bit hungrier. I think that this roster is in a great spot in terms of they have good pieces to grow a lot as a team, and they just need the motivation and the environment to chase that aspiration in.
We'll see if they do have that drive. Any thoughts about it, Paul?
Well, I think Anderzz hit the nail on the head. Growth is kind of the name of the game, right? It's a solid lineup. I don't expect them to make like top 4 VCT in the qualifier tomorrow, but I'm excited to see I'm excited to double back to this roster in like 2 months and see how it's gone. Players like Trill, Stellar, Vic. I really like watching Vic play. He's hilarious to watch play a lot of the time. I think there is a lot of it just takes the right sauce to get it all together.
My question is, Epa's the only name here that I really don't know anything about, really haven't heard about another situation. Do either of you know the background on Epathy? Is this just some cracked out jet they found from matchmaking that they're pulling in here?
I assume it's one of those names that I probably should know, but slipped past my radar while I was working in Europe.
Really quick on like VLR, played Cosmic Divide for a little while, played Timeout for a little while in like late last year. So nothing like super notable, but not bad teams by any stretch of the imagination. So this could be a scenario where, cracked player on the wrong team and now hopefully moving to the right team.
That's interesting. I mean, you got a little bit more experience with Stellar and Physic than you've got very much an unknown with Empathy. I am curious to see how this roster is going to shape up. We'll have to keep an eye on that going forward. Moving on to the next announcement here, Doc Zero. That's a different medical thing. Adds jammies. This is the announcement of the roster. It's Screwface, Anderson, Kohler, and Ainge. That was all coming back from last season, and jammies now joining on in. This is a team that was sort of, to my read, was sort of tier 3-4 and then had the ability to punch up occasionally in an event. Never really has been a contender for VCT qualification, not a team that we were necessarily looking at for them. Do we think that this changes? Do we think that jammies might be the antidote to make this team a little bit more of a contender, or are they still just going to be one of those teams that's sort of maybe not making the big waves in VCT, but competing at that next level? What do you think, Paul?
I want to say yes, right? Like, I think I think they have all the pieces to like start shooting for VCT spots potentially, but they've also been playing with jammies for like the last few, like they played with them for like the last couple of NSG things, I think, as well as like Valorant Page, the Knights tournament last week. And they've been doing okay. It hasn't been like, coming out of nowhere, phenomenal, stellar kind of thing like a crew or, anything of that magnitude. I think this is another situation where it might take a month or two before we actually see results from this lineup. But like, you talk about guys like jammies, guys like Kohler, and I think they're all phenomenal players.
Sorry for looking away here. My dog is barking in his sleep, and it's the most adorable thing ever. Just like little wolves, but I can tell he's going nuts in whatever dream he's having. So any big thoughts on this one, Anderzz, before we move on?
No, I mean, Darkseer is one of those teams that, I mean, you can go back as far as when I was coaching with Virtuoso, that like they've been a great sort of like upper tier 3, lower tier 2 contender, depending on how you want to label those categories. But they've had a lot of trouble whenever they run up against another team that has like a lot of experience and firepower behind them. And I don't think this necessarily creates an astronomical change that'll allow them to immediately punch through that, but it should give them the theoretical ceiling where if they put in the hours, they can get to that point sooner rather than later. Finally, they're not going to be gated by the players on their roster. They have runway.
Yeah.
Okay. To me, it feels a little bit like treading water. Not any criticism on any individual. They've all had the flashes. They've all had the moments. It's just, I don't know. It'll be curious to see if this team can just raise their estimation a little bit. I think, placing top 10 in a VCT would be a really big achievement for this squad at this point. And so that's the kind of thing we're looking for. Moving on here, Lakia. We find out where he went. He was done with Vision Strikers, or DRX Vision Strikers as they're now known. He's going Japanese with a team called Exist. My tweet about this was esports continues to break new boundaries in silly ways to spell the word exist.
I'm going to be honest, until you said it out loud, I didn't even realize that's what it was going for.
Like, we've got Exist, we've got Existence, there's Exist, the former CS player who is just XIZT. I feel like we've probably gone through every possible iteration of consonants and vowels to make those syllables sounds. At this point, I mean, I know nothing about this team. This is a relatively new organization, according to the Spike GG tweet that I literally just read out.
It's the Ignis Blackbird Corps, another like Japanese team staple.
Okay.
I'm like the NA guy who watches way more Southeast Asia than he should, so I know these players. But
relatable.
All right, well, if you know these players, how do you feel about this roster?
It's a really weird move. I'll be straight up. It feels like a decent roster that was struggling to make like top 8 in Japan that's suddenly like, let's bring in a superstar. So it'll be a really interesting roster to watch because it feels like you're pulling in Lakia to a team that hasn't shown the level of competence required to support him correctly. Because he's not a star fragger. You're not bringing in like a Munchkin. This isn't going to be a Jet who's just like yeeting himself around the map, killing everything. He's a phenomenal Sova who's great at enabling people, and there's no one to enable here.
Yeah.
So
and along that train, right? I feel like this move only happens because he got benched from Vision Strikers so late before the next cycle of VCT started, right? None of the Korean teams wanted to pick up, like, because even if Laki is better than whatever Sova you have, like, it's just so late. You don't want to play with him for a week when you have to make VCT through the Open Qualifier, right? So you're not going to pick him up. But he's going to be he's going to be a massive improvement to pretty much any team you add him to in Japan, outside of maybe communication errors with language barriers, if that's an issue for them. But this is like also like very volatile for him, because if he goes to Japan and just like dumps on everyone somehow, right? Like, this team comes out as the #1 team, he's going to be back in Korea in no time with like probably a bigger paycheck, I would imagine. But if he doesn't succeed on Exist, who's going to pick him up, right? I feel like this can go so wrong.
I'm going to put my conjecture hat in here and go for some wild conjecture. And I'm going to guess from Lakia's perspective. What happened was he signed Division Strikers from Newturn, thinking that was the ideal opportunity to be on the top organization in the region and really make waves. And then they were like, okay, we're never going to play you. Like, you're our backup. You're our bench. Like, maybe we'll integrate you at some point. And he was like, what? That's the plan? That was the plan this whole time? What the hell? And I'm going to guess there are personality clashes of some variety, because you don't sign a promising young player and then never use them if things are going peachy. So then he finds himself in the situation where he's got the gilded handcuffs on, right? He's contracted to the best org in the region, but they're never going to play him. They're going to keep him in a bench spot. And I don't have any idea what his contract looks like, but I know they tend to be a little less friendly in that region of the world in terms of players than they are in NA. And I know that when players get benched, those contracts frequently get halved. Again, no idea what his actual situation is, but I have no clue if he was actually making any money then in that situation. So you've got a player who wants to compete, wants to be on a top team, clearly enjoys playing the game and competing at a high level, who can't do that, who's probably not making a bunch of money to make it worth it to just sit there for a while, and who has no realistic chance of getting back in because of some variety of fractured relationship, I'd imagine. Complete conjecture at this point. So I'm sure from his perspective, fucking anyone. Right? Sure. Just give me the key to these damn gilded handcuffs and let me out so I can go play and remind the world that I'm good at this and that someone should come get me and make me the feature of their team. So I'm sure from his perspective, he's just like, I'm free! Dobby is a free house elf! Dobby has a sock! Master has given Dobby a sock! Like, that's... So let him go and let him go do things and actually, yeah, maybe it won't work out, but at least give him a chance to put up or shut up.
It's funny you frame it that way, because actually one of the post-game celebrations that we ended up not doing at Champs, because he ended up playing, was if we played Vision Strikers, beat them, and they didn't bench in Lakia at any point, we're actually going to mime out someone in prison and have a sign that said #free Lakia.
That would have been amazing. I'm so sad that didn't happen now.
Oh, man.
I'm so sad.
Oh, I've never wanted to play a bench before.
He's free. He's dead.
He's free.
But in a good way.
I'm very pleased.
And, I hope all of my worries are unfounded and he just goes to Japan and he just does Lakia things and he's cracked, right? And, it works out for him. I'm just worried about the however many universes in which the team flops out, because no matter how good Lakia is, it just flops out. And then spirals from there.
I mean, look at it this way. There's not stiff competition in the Japanese Valorant scene at this point, right? Like, Crazy Raccoons are the dominant force and have been the dominant force, and they're all right. They're not great. Like, you can dethrone them. Now, will it be this roster, or will it just be, stunting on hoes and still the team loses? Either way, I think he still gets a chance to show, hopefully I can do it. All right, moving on here. Fnatic, here we go. We got the man on to talk about Fnatic.
Yeah,
news.
this worked out perfectly.
Player. Brave AF, great name. Just want to say that right off the bat. Anderzz, what's your take on this?
So, it makes a lot of sense. I had looked at him a little bit in the past, and he's one of the players where if you're going to make a top free agent list for Sovas in Europe, and you were looking really hard and being incredibly thorough, you're going to find him really late in the process, because he's not one of the people that immediately stands out when you're like filtering the stats or whatever. But once you find him, you're like, holy shit, this guy's insane. Lots of promise, but not playing at the level where his name is going to be some standout thing that you see immediately, which is the perfect sort of pickup. You're looking at, he's a Durka is honestly the way I would put it. Like Durka's background before he got picked up by Fnatic was like, oh yeah, he played on Crowcrad and some Finnish mixes. And this is a similar situation where it's like, oh, Brave comes from CIS, has played on a couple mixed rosters there to fairly high success. And when you look at his stats, he very clearly has the ability to punch up into tier 1. I imagine Fnatic was like, all right, let's give it a whirl. Brought him into trials. He proved that he was in fact capable or more than capable of elevating to that level. And now they're running with it.
Nice.
My conclusion from the announcement is the dude has the strongest chin line. It's like
honestly,
like a superhero chin.
Chiseled.
God damn, yeah, pull it up. Look at that. Look at that.
Look at it.
He's got like spare chin in his chin. Strong chin. So this is meant to be a compliment, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I feel like anytime you comment on someone's appearance, you gotta clarify that. Strong chin game, strong sofa game, apparently. So I mean, all right, I understand that there's some personal stake and skin in this situation, perhaps for you, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Is Fnatic better now? Do you think that this move is going to be an immediate improvement? Do you think it'll take some time?
I think it's could be immediate improvement, could take a little bit of time, honestly. So a little bit deeper in the announcement, they sort of let the cat out of the bag in saying that the reason they picked up a high-level Sova is to move Boaster into like sort of that flash initiator role silo. Leak. Boaster's one of the best breaches on Earth. He is utterly effing insane on that agent. In terms of the way that he IGLs and the way that he manages timings, him on Flash Initiator is probably where he should have always been in terms of just being able to set pace and make sure that things are happening at the rate that they need to. Before I got there, people often sort of detracted from Fnatic, saying that like a huge amount of their success comes from Boaster micromanaging everyone. No one seems capable of making their own decisions. Then we got to Champions, and it was like, okay, there are clearly systems and protocols in place, and now the team gets to operate on its own. This is now the next evolution of that, where the team knows how to operate and work on their own, but now they're always going to be hitting the perfect timing windows that they need to, because Boaster's with the pack and can set that pace as is required. So you might have a situation where just by virtue of those timings being where they're supposed to be, the team's now completely bananas. The alternative to that is they need to find their footing a little bit and get used to that change in sort of acceleration and deceleration rates in mid-round before they feel as comfortable as they were when we were playing at Champs.
Okay, cool. So like short-term maybe, but mid to long-term, you definite.
Yes, as soon as Boaster gets comfortable in his new role and calling from the new position in the team that he's in, they're going to farm unless Brave just suddenly like chops off both of his hands. I assume that he's more than capable enough as a player to. If
he can throw a dart on sight, we're good. That's all we need.
You hear that, Carlos? Go break his wrists. Get ahead of the game. No. That's very exciting, though. That's very optimistic and exciting, and it gives the audience something to watch for specifically when they're seeing Fnatic play, which is how is Boaster adjusting to the new role, and then how is Brave integrating with the pack, and how are those timings working out? Something to focus on for sure when watching Fnatic games. Moving on here, TSM finally unveiled their new roster. Now the when does TSM play memes can start. Plus Corey, plus Rossi. Still have Leviathan, Wardell, and Sabrosa. And they've also brought up their coaching staff from the TSM Academy team, which is interesting here. I don't know much about that coaching staff. Corey and Rossi are
Yeah, I don't know much specifically, but I know that TSM Academy has been doing well.
Is it Apex from TSM Academy?
Yeah,
is that the coach? Yeah. So his background is he was coaching P1, Phoenix 1 back in the day. The infamous...
He's the assistant coach, by the way. It's Ruby's is head coach.
Ruby's is head coach? Okay.
And then Apex is assistant coach.
So Apex comes from the academy team and sort of P1 in the scene prior to that. So I knew him. I've talked with him quite a bit throughout all of my time with Virtuoso. So him being in that support staff is great to see. I know that he has a lot of really excellent connections throughout the space and has had exclusively good things said about him by every player I've talked to. So honestly, the coaching staff is the thing that I hone in on there, because if I look at the TSM roster, you have some extremely strong personalities. Corey and Rossi are like probably two of my top 5 most intense personalities currently in professional Valorant. So how that roster is going to gel is a massive question mark.
Sure. And I mean, we've talked about this roster got leaked way before it was public. We've talked about it a lot, and if it's getting to the point for TSM, right? How many iterations is it going to take for them to actually live up to the giant TSM hype? Because it's a massive fan base of very loud, very very loud fans. And if I can see it exploding in so many different ways. But I hope that Anderzz, that what you're alluding to with the coaching staff works out for him, because I obviously really like watching Corey play. I think Corey is an insane. I think there was a lot of like insane mechanical skill on this roster, but how it meshes together in the macro is going to be a very interesting situation.
Yeah, definitely. I with Virtuoso, I actually trialed Rossi. And so I have first-hand experience with him as a player and his communication style and the way that he operates. And it's funny, sort of the route that his career has taken since, because the reason we didn't pick him up after the trial was me and Ely sort of looked at each other and were like, this kid's an IGL in the making, and we don't need an extra IGL right now. And so the fact that he's now in IGL makes complete sense. It's just going to be interesting to see how one of the youngest guys on that roster, being the IGL and being one who doesn't have a ton of IGLing experience, is able to sort of keep up and put the reins on Sabrosa, Wardell, and Corey.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like a tall ask.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
It's three calls that those 3 players think are bad away from just falling apart, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, I think that it's just going to be hard to rein them in. Like, you're going to have to build almost like a level of respect built on personal relationships and camaraderie. Then, like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like it's
going
to require process for sure.
It's like learning to ride on a war horse, right? Like you're not taking it easy on him. It's not like that
elephant,
early
war elephants.
Yeah, it's not that early experience is coming with team where you're like, I'm one of the more players on here. Like I have some veterans. So you got some big personalities, and you've also got players who are kind of like franchise players, especially when it comes to like Wardell and Sabrosa with their massive presence and brand in a way that you have for Odyssey. That's going to be very interesting, and it will be interesting as well. I think you're reining them in. I don't know if this fast forwarding thing is going on for the audience as well, but it's hilarious to watch.
I think it's just for us.
Watching myself slingshot 30 seconds into the future.
But I think it's going to be very interesting. I think one of the things you're going to look for is, does calling break down towards the end of maps? That's what you're looking for. Where if something's not working, do you start to see those picks come where players are making individual plays and that kind of thing? So that should be interesting. And
I think it becomes a situation where there's an argument to be made. This is going to be a win more, lose more kind of team, right? If the calls are going well in the first 6 rounds, they are going to snowball so into between Wardell and Corey alone, right? You get those 2 players on a good groove, they are going to just shoot everybody. Nobody is going to get to play the game. They're going to click everybody's head the second they come around a corner. But the second comms start to break down just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one.
There's going to be a lot of hero rounds with that.
Yeah,
is what I like. The way that I see it is either I'll be honest, like my prediction for them is I don't think they're going to get to a place where they have a really healthy, well built out protocol and comm system. I think that the IGLing isn't going to be much outside of pre-round macro strategy, and that their mid-round is going to be a lot of individual playmaking, on the fly decisions, very player initiative driven, which might work well for them. And I mean, it can definitely work well for them based off of the firepower that they have, because the precondition to that playstyle is that any player on your team can straight 1v5. And I think that 3 out of 5 players on that make a very strong argument, and the other 2 have shown at least the potential to do that. So if they do end up in that style, it can work. Will it, though? Time will tell.
Yeah. I mean, this first VCT will be very demonstrative of that. If you're TSM, you want to make a splash right off the rip. Moving on here. That's sort of the bulk of the roster move that we've had in the last week. I saw someone in chat was asking about 100 Thieves. We did talk about that last week. You can go watch the VOD of the old episode if you want your 100 Thieves breakdown specifically. I mean, Anderzz, unless you have any soapbox statements about the new 100 Thieves roster you want to get out in public, we'll just move on.
No, I'm good. I'll let the roster's results speak for themselves shortly.
There we go. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Knights of Valor Rampage. And to talk to us about it, we have our missing host, actually. Sam is off casting VRLs, but she did cast the Valor Rampage, including the final. So we'll let her recap it before we get in and break it down. Roll the tape!
Hey folks, Nari here. You may recognize me from such places as this podcast. I hope the guys are behaving without me there, boys. Anyway, I'm going to give a little bit of a rundown of what happened at the Knights Valor Rampage event. And boy, was it amazing to watch. We had the qualifiers, and then we had the main event over the weekend. This, of course, was the very first Riot-sanctioned event, which included agent picks and bans. Now, the agent picks and bans, a little bit of a double-edged sword and a little bit of an interesting execution. Basically, how they ran it was you would have your agent picks and bans for the entirety of your series, be that one map in a best of 1 or an entire best of 3. Instead of having the agent picks and bans per map. Now, this was a little bit strange and it did leave something to be desired, but it was a lot of fun. The other kink, of course, being that teams would have their 2 protects and then finally at the end they would get their ban. By this point, the most impactful agents would have already been kept in. Now, I'm sure Anderzz has the lowdown for all of you, all of the juicy statistics, but just to go over some of the highlights, Astra and Sova consistently getting protected as 2 of the most irreplaceable agents in the entire agent pool. Jet very often being saved. And then when you finally get to the bans, you're not left with a lot of options as to what could be an impactful ban. And again, Anderzz will have all of those stats for you. So it did make things a little difficult to get really good insight out of, but overall it was a lot of fun to watch. I think the biggest thing at the moment is that it looked a little messy. Obviously, teams don't get to fully prep because you're not 100% sure what other teams are going to be banning or picking. And so it didn't look as clean cut as the Valorant that we're used to, obviously. But I think with a little bit of time, it could be a ton of fun to watch. Now, let's jump into the highlights of what happened this weekend. And I'm going to go ahead and just go into the semifinals and the grand finals. Now, a crew, unfortunately, we actually had Com on last week talking about a crew's amazing winning streak, and of course, what other team than Cloud9 to finally put an end to that? I think if there was any team that was going to do it, you're kind of okay with it being Cloud9. So, of course, Cloud9 do secure themselves that spot in the grand final. And on the other side of the bracket, we had Renegades versus NRG. And I think it was also unsurprising to see NRG coming out on top of that one. Renegades have, of course, been absolutely dominating in the Tier 2 scene for quite a long time. They racked up ridiculous points during the Nerd Street Gamers Opens last year. But unfortunately, you know, NRG being at that kind of Tier 1 level wasn't really going to be easy for Renegades to come out on top. Now, what was a little disappointing, I was kind of looking forward to this, the grand final was meant to be a best of 5, and I really wanted to see how the agent picks and bans at the beginning of the series would translate over the course of potentially 5 maps. But the teams had agreed, and it was decided that the grand final would instead be a best of 3. So much like the rest of the main event, no big surprises there and no fun entertainment. That being said, it was a pretty spicy grand final. We jumped straight into map 1 and Cloud9 wiped the floor with NRG. It was like they weren't even in the Sova. A 13-1 domination. And I'll be honest, by the end of map 1, things were looking pretty bleak. We were sitting in the green room thinking, is that it? Are we at the end of our rope here? Is this going to be another quick A tournament over and done and dusted. C9, arguably the best team in North America after their VCT results at Champions. This was a little disappointing, but we jump back into map 2 and NRG, they turned up the heat. It went all the way to 6-6 in the first half. And once we swapped sides, they took it all the way into overtime before finally being able to take a map off of Cloud9, the only team to do so in the entirety of the Valor Rampage tournament. So a bit of a feather in the cap on that one. And as we moved over on to Breeze, our final map, things started to look a little dire for Cloud9. 9-3 at the half in favor of NRG. But wouldn't you know it? That's when Cloud9 activated the 9-3 curse. They came through blazing in the second half, absolutely dominating with a 9-round win streak. They didn't concede a single round to NRG in the entirety of the second half of that map. And so they came out on top with a 2-1 victory. There you go, maths. Fantastic work from the Cloud9 guys. And what was really interesting about this one in particular was the agents that they had banned and picked, specifically being the ones that were banned. Jet and Reyna had been banned out, and Yoru got protected. It was very, very strange. We got to kind of chat with James IRL at the end of it. We kind of picked his brain a little bit, and he said one of the reasons, because Cloud9 had been doing this throughout the tournament, one of the reasons they were protecting really weird agents, Brimstone, Phoenix, Yoru, and then not playing them was because they were trying to play mind games with the enemy team. And I think that that was a lot of fun. It was really cool to get that kind of insight into why they would ban or protect a particular agent. I will also say that not having Jet made things very interesting because, of course, both teams were playing Raze. And now you've got to figure out, how are you bringing Raze into maps like Icebox or Breeze, you know, where she doesn't get a ton of playtime. Overall, I think it was a great learning experience. I think that we had a lot of fun watching all of the games, but personal opinion, not quite ready for it just yet. For those of you that did watch it though, I hope you enjoyed it. Guys, that's all I have to say about the Knights Valor Rampage. Enjoy the rest of the show.
I like giving it the justification of mind games and not just trolling. Like, come on. I know enough people on that Cloud9 team to know what that was.
I was going to say,
yeah.
knowing the C9 team and like just a bit of their personalities from interacting with them at Champions. No, they were just trolling, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
They're just having fun with it.
They should walk into this tournament and troll and still win, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they
that's not disrespect to anyone else in this tournament, right?
No,
Cloud9's just that good.
Yeah.
They're just that good.
They were just litmus testing themselves. They're like, we should be able to play with one hand almost and still win this event.
Yeah.
If we just kind of don't try to glean any additional advantage through this agent pick ban, can we win what we're supposed to win? That like this was just them warming up for VCT and being like, we better have our act together.
Exactly. And, you know, it's not like Cloud9 is going to be, you know, hardcore tryharding in a tournament with a unique format right before VCT starts, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to be throwing out all their main strats. They want to put people on different agents because it means that they can still, like, troll, but also somewhat try and still win, right?
Yeah.
You can have people off-roll and still play the game to win and then win, and it works out for everybody.
I think they just wanted to mess up the statistics for Andersz's inevitable video.
That too.
No, I mean, I'd imagine as well, if you're trying to find out the most information about the ban, like protecting two agents who you don't want to play and being like, ban whoever you want. And we want to figure out how that looks. That's a more interesting way to do it. Yeah, I mean, I guess our question is, generally speaking, how much credence should we give the results in this bracket? Maybe not the Cloud9 win, because Cloud9 was expected to win. They deliver. That's fine. But everything else, how much credence do you give these results? How much do you think there should be an asterisk on them? How much do you think they're an accurate representation of teams' form headed into VCT?
I think that it's really, really hard, man. Because like I want to say that like there's a lot of weight to these results and that they had a good amount of value, but to Sam's point, I'm like probably the biggest agent draft phase salesman in the entire Valorant ecosystem. I love stuff like this, and just the way that I think about the game is lent very well to this kind of style of pre-game system. I still think it's too early for Pick
Agreed.
bans. I think we need another controller before this is even marginally reasonable.
Yeah.
And that segues into why I think these results should be taken with a substantial amount of salt. Is in any game where Astra was banned, they weren't playing Valorant. Or at least they weren't playing the same game that we're going to be seeing in VCT. Because right now, if you're not playing Astra, you're kind of just trolling. And she was banned out in a decent number of these matches.
Unless the map pool is like Icebox, Breeze, Fracture, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like you have even as deep as the semifinal with C9 and Ghost, where they were Ascent was in the map pool, but there was no Astra. You're telling me that was a serious BO3? Come on now.
Yeah. And it was, Sova too, right? We need someone who contests Sova. Sova's,
make Valorant players play without wall hacks. Make it happen. See if they can still clear corners.
And that's the other problem, right? I think like I understand why protects were put in this tournament, because without protects, like Anderzz said, you're just not playing Valorant, right? Like if you can't protect Astra, you can't protect Sova.
Oh, it'd be so much better.
You're just throwing 200 players into lobbies and making it chaos.
Pure
right?
chaos.
Like you're putting
Hell yeah.
$25,000 on the line and rolling a 100-sided die to see who gets it.
Amen.
But
Sign me
with
up.
it,
Yeah, right? I'd watch
they
that.
just get protected, and then
So much better.
nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
I think in 6 months we can revisit the issue when we have 3 new agents in theory. And look, hey, maybe then we can start talking about bans without protects, and maybe doing them map by map as well, because I think doing it at the top of the series after all of them, like that, it gets a little weird for me personally. Because like,
You gotta think.
are you gonna do your one ban based off one map, right?
Yeah.
Or there's too much to it right now,
Layers.
and there's not enough agent to justify the level of intensity that a ban comes in with right now.
All right, so let's say theoretical future, thinking about the theoretical
Okay.
future of agent bans, right? You throw one more controller agent in and one more information agent of some variety. Sova-esque. Doesn't have to be a Sova. It can be...
Doesn't even have to be as good as Sova.
Could just be teams learning how to play KO finally.
That too could happen. What? You mean Valorant teams would avoid learning new agents because they're comfortable with what they're doing? But anyway, you throw in a couple more agents. Let's say there's 4 more agents, 3 more agents by the end of the year, because that's sort of the pace that they're on.
Yeah.
End of year, headed into 2023, do you think we'll see a ban system introduced, and do you think we should?
Yes.
I think we should at least have another tournament like this where we throw it in and see what happens. At the very least, I think I don't even think we have to wait until the end of the year, right? Riot has even said, because there's going to be that whole off season where there's going to be a bunch of third-party tournaments. That's the time to mess with it, right? Once Champions ends in what?
November.
Is it September? Is it November? Really?
Pretty
No,
sure.
it's
I thought
much
it was
earlier
earlier
now.
this. I
It
thought it was
is
September
earlier
earlier
than
now.
that. I'm trolling.
September
It's
now.
September now.
Yeah,
That whole
September,
last third
right?
of the year is for third party.
So,
Yeah, exactly. It's like
first
first
week
strike.
of October.
Second strike.
Here's our big third-party tournament where we try out this ban
Strike squared.
system, and then it goes terribly, and you try a different one, and you can adjust it and see what works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do a little tweaks.
That's a really fair point. I had forgotten that we have that. Like I knew it was there, but just how large of a window we have for third-party tournaments in sort of the off season, that is like ripe for something like this to be experimented with. Because I know people aren't gonna want it by the end of this year. It's not gonna happen. We would have to be implementing it in VCT right now for people to not make the argument that it shouldn't be applied to like late stage VCT or champions.
We don't want an Overwatch League, what was it, 2019 or whatever, where it was the whole year of GOATs, and then at the last friggin' week,
Guess
they
what?
were
We've
like,
changed the
hey, roll lock, everybody!
Oh boy.
Yeah.
We don't
Great
want to
times.
do that here, right? Let's
Yeah.
keep one format for the year, more or less, and then, we have a much longer off season this year with third-party tournaments. That's when we can experiment.
That's just a really good rule of thumb for esports in general is, did Overwatch League do it? Don't do it. Don't
You
do it.
mean
It's
like,
a really nice.
You mean like not getting Brennan Seich? Anyways,
It's like
Oh,
it's like they laid out a
toxic.
it's like they
Whoa.
laid out a roadmap where they hit every landmine and pit trap, and it's like don't go that route, go all the other routes.
You see
Anything
that
else,
crater? Don't go there.
Yeah, no, you don't want to know what happened.
Jeez.
Let's move on from the Knights Valor Rampage. I think it was a very interesting tournament. I think that it was a lot of fun, and I, as a personal fan of just chaos factors in events and tournaments, I think it's fantastic to watch teams adapt to new things and information. That to me is the part of people. And I thought that from your number crunching, especially in the qualifier, where Anderzz, and if anyone hasn't seen his video about this, go to Andersz's YouTube channel, watch his stuff. You should be watching his stuff anyway. There's the plug. But I thought it's interesting that the three most protected agents are Astra, Sova, and then Jet. Because it's like team player, fuck it, go kill.
It's just the three agents that as of that tournament had no no viable substitutes.
Yeah, they don't have alternatives.
Right?
That's really what it boils
Exactly.
down to. That held true for the main, by the way. They were the top three, and
That's not
the
surprising.
next closest. Get this. So you had Sova, who's the most protected again.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna have a micro rant real quick, if that's okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
Riot still hasn't nerfed Sova. They've shown no inclination to nerf Sova. Whenever pros talk about unbalanced characters in the game, no one talks about Sova. Yet, you have a set of 2 tournaments where you have agent bans, and universally, the number 1 protected agent, indicating significant personal priority and emphasis on his power by players, was Sova, by a large margin. If you think this agent is balanced, you're ignoring reality. If you need a better case, if you need a better example than this, you're just insane. Because this is saying, you've created a system where, all else barred, players are given an opportunity to almost subconsciously say, this is the agent I can't currently play without because it's so powerful. And it was consistently the one nobody talks about. Maybe we should talk about it. Just maybe.
Yeah. Now here's my question: do you have a proposed Sova nerf?
Yeah, you have
there's a lot of ways
the
to
move
do it.
speed of a drone, and you literally fix the agent. Done, finished. Because the problem with Sova right now is that he's meant to be a scout. He's meant to find information for his team, and Aldrone isn't a scouting tool. It's an entry by proxy tool that people use as a sixth body. If you have its move speed, it can't be efficiently used to take space as a sixth body anymore. Not only that, but as an indirect repercussion of having its move speed, it can't cover as much space. So the Sova has to be in a much higher risk assumption position if he wants to use his drone somewhere that's going to get a line on a very high impact angle. If I want,
That was going to be. Oh, sorry. keep
no,
going.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that was going to be my next question for you. Was do you have the speed and then double the length that it's live or something? But you just want it to be mini drone. I can clear this corner. That's it.
Well, exactly. You should be using drone as a scouting tool. It has infinite sight lines for a reason. That's its nuanced difference from a Skydog. Skydog has limited sight, moves super fast. Aldrone should have unlimited sight and move super slow. It's pretty much that simple, but
That makes sense to me.
There you go. Valorant, Rito, please fix. Here's your proposal from game dev Anderzz. Get it, make it happen. Make it happen. I'm for it. Retweet, endorse, signed on, seconded, down for it. Moving on here.
Protect.
Moving on here. Protect. Yes, exactly. Moving on here, VCT NA Challengers Open Qualifier 1. VCT's happening
boy.
in NA, and we get 2 other qualifiers, and there's a bazillion teams in the bracket. So how do we even make sense of this? Because there's, 256 teams or some crazy
you
number?
can't. Don't try.
I mean, I was just before the show today and last night, I was just trying to go through and figure out, okay, which teams, as far as they're concerned, as their own team, they have to make it through the qualifier to succeed. I pulled out 10 teams for 4 spots. This is gonna be bloody this weekend.
Yeah. Who can forget such stable rosters as Bunbo Hui and Mommy?
I'm sorry, wait. Did you say there's a team called Mommy?
Yeah, just Mommy. There's Jit Lickers down there. Which feels like something I'm not allowed to say.
I was about to say.
I'm assuming it's okay since they were allowed to sign up under it. But yeah, no, in general, this is just, it's going to be kind of madness.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, there's
Sussy's
a
my
Sussy.
new favorite team.
There's
dude.
a team called
I don't know
Sussy.
who they are, but they're my favorite team now.
They're going to be matched up against Baka in the bracket.
Bro, they better be.
Yeah, it's just madness, right? I mean, realistically, until the round of 32, it is very hard to make heads or tails of this bracket. And then in the round of 32, it becomes double elim, so then you've just got a very interesting bracket to watch. But until we hit that point, it's just like scroll through and see who got upset. And if there's an upset, holy cow, that's wild. You know, if you go out before that round of 32, there's another one, fortunately for you, but holy shit, that puts you on notice.
Is it wild though? That's the thing that I sort of run into at this event is like, would a team getting upset in the round of 32 even really qualify as an upset? You have teams that almost no rosters are actually the same that they were.
Mm-hmm.
By virtue of that, seeding is going to be completely out of whack. You're going to end up with matchups pretty early on, I imagine. Like we'll have a good chunk of these end up in round of 64 matchups where you're like, how the hell did that happen? And it's just by virtue of the lineup changes. I think this is just going to be like upset city. It's going to be a clown fiesta.
It's not a question of if upsets are going to happen, but who they happen to, right? We talked, I think I said it a few weeks ago, but there's just going to be some cracked 16-year-old that comes out of nowhere and plays a team that had a bad map. And that suddenly a tier 1 org is falling out and allowed. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like we're going to see TSM fall out in the 64 or something crazy. Right. Or, Gen G.
Blood and chaos.
Right? So there are going to be a lot of very angry fans 2 days from now.
Mm-hmm. I'm super down for Team Chaos, for just madness. It's what I'm all about in these. Like, it's just chaos as a ladder, you know? I want to see the overturn. I want to see the turmoil. I want to see people whose names I've never heard of before just dominate on the established pros. That's the beauty of an open bracket. I am curious to see how much turnover there will be. I will say, just based on how you're feeling about teams, you've watched them in some of these open tournaments, some of the NSG opens of that. Is there a team that you think has a good shot to make it through that no one would expect at this point? Is there a dark horse team that you think people should pay attention to in this bracket outside of, the big 8 to 10 names that people sort of expect to be making it up?
This is a cop-out answer because I don't think that it's one that nobody thinks about, but I think it's the one that everyone should talk about, the few who haven't sort of put it in play yet, which is a crew. I think you have all of the like big name orged teams, but then you have a crew. And I think there's a decent chance that you end up in a situation where you've got that sort of fairy tale run potential where you've got all of these freshly minted, jumbled up big name org rosters that haven't built a ton of synergy. And then you've got a crew, a team that I think on a like raw objective level is probably a little bit worse than those teams in terms of ceiling, but has been grinding together as a stack for long enough that all of the synergies there, all of the natural presence and comfortability already exists. They can absolutely steal maps, if not series, off any team in this event, literally anyone. So if you put that state of being into play, they could literally come out of this as just the top seed and make it through. Like, I don't think that is not out of the cards completely, which is insane to say.
No,
I love it. You're on the right podcast to talk up a crew. We,
oh yeah,
we love a crew here.
Oh, nice. Okay.
We absolutely do.
I mean, I'm a little bit
in
salty
this
because I've lost to their players in finals more than a couple of times, but
yeah, we're big Com fans here. He was on the show last week before that. I don't remember. Sometime.
I think week before. I don't remember.
He came on for an interview. But no, we big up a crew in the South. Paul, you got anyone? Who's your dark horse?
Well, a crew was my top of the list, so thanks.
I got sniped.
The other two teams I want to throw out there are
that's why the guest gets
NRG.
to go first.
NRG, I actually think have a lot of momentum right now.
Okay.
Since they added Hayes, every time I see them, they just get better and better, right? I think they get more watching NRG last year, I always beat my head into the wall because they looked like a good team that just couldn't ever decide what they wanted to do. And the longer Hayes has been on that roster, the more decisive they've looked on every single map. when it comes to just, what the objective is in each individual round. Do we want to go this site? Do we want to spread out? Do we want to X, Y, or Z, right? They even look good against C9 debatably. I mean, hard to say that it was, it wasn't full force C9, obviously. But I think NRG has a good amount of momentum, and they've beaten a few of the other like tier 1 teams that have reared their head into some of like the NSG Opens and such. So I'm excited to see if NRG can kick out maybe some of the tier 1 orgs that started slacking toward the end of last year. And the other team I want to bring up is the Guard. I think the Guard the Guard are my sleeper pick, dude. Like between like Saya, Jonah P, Valen, and then you add Trent was so good.
Yeah.
I could not believe how good he looked in that one NSG tournament, right? Oh my God. I just want to see Trent play every map in every series on every team, dude. Like, I'm very excited for the Guard.
Hell yeah.
I'm very excited to see them.
I'm glad that we're following the trend, because that's where I was going to go is the Guard.
Nice.
As the number 1 MCE stand. Just let my flag hang out there. Very excited to see what this team's going to be able to do in VCT, and I think they're quite optimistic, which obviously it's a new project. Speaking about your jumbled together roster still developing synergy, like that is probably the poster child for it.
Yep.
Right. So let's see how quick that synergy's developed, because there is a lot of interesting and exciting things about this roster. But yeah, all right, here's another question for you. Obviously 4 teams have already been slid into the main thing. But is there any team that you think is just gonna shit the bed, just that fans are gonna have high expectations for, and it's just gonna full belly flop straight into the pool and just eat it?
I'm gonna get myself deleted, but if I say my
Yeah, right.
I'm actually gonna be flambéed across the internet if I give this opinion, because it is a hot take.
Yo,
I'm interested now. I really
want
it.
You've teased us. You've given us the taste.
I think TSM is basically gonna explode, because I think that their team is going to be holy feast or famine. I think that they've got crazy aimers, a team of strong personalities that almost surely isn't going to have a system in place. And what that is a recipe for disaster, because they're going to have games where they 13-0 people, and then they're going to have the one game where they lose to a team that has no business coming close to them.
Yep. I could not agree more. TSM was one of the 2 teams that I had listed under that category.
What's your other one? Yeah,
He's
drop
in
it.
the same spot. He's
Drop
like,
it.
do I say this
Drop
out
it like
loud?
it's
It's
hot.
not as
Drop it like it's hot.
in
Do I
terms of
summon
getting
the
roasted by
fanboys?
in terms of getting roasted by fanboys, it's not as spicy. I think Gen G is
Really?
Yeah, I get it.
so I don't want to think that, because I look at their roster and like, what's the opposite of recency bias? Nostalgia bias?
Nostalgia bias. Yeah, rose tinted
Like, I
glasses.
like every player on that. Like, I look at like Sean. Oh, Sean's so good, right? But then I think about like their LCQ performance and how they did in like the second VCT last year, and I just think to myself, they didn't change enough. They hardly changed anything on their roster. It looks like, we haven't seen them.
Rhyme. That's it.
We've gotten no news. They got Rhyme.
That's the rhyme.
That's it. And Rhyme's good. I'm not gonna lie.
Solid.
But I just cannot. It's hard for me with only one change and no tournament playtime in like 3 months to believe in Gen G.
I think the no tournament playtime is the thing that I seize on, both for TSM and for Gen G, which is that neither of these teams were good enough to just be like, let's just not play and bring out our secret weapon. Like that whole like strat saving, that kind of thing, that only works if your strats are good enough to be
if
worth
you're
the
winning
damn,
with
right?
your strats.
Like, yeah, if you can win the games and you're confident that will continue, then sure, don't show your shit publicly and keep it secret and keep working on stuff and tooling
They have
away.
Elma Putty. I give them the benefit of the doubt there. They could honestly, like, complete genuine opinion of the teams in North America. If I was to expect a team to have strategies that were good enough to be worth actually saving, I put Gen G as one of maybe 3 teams that fits that bill. So
Okay. I I'm very curious about what Rhyme's going to look like within this team. I think that those are two very potentially volatile teams just because we don't have recent games. We just really don't know what kind of shape or form they're going to be. And because of the way this format works and how it is, single elim through the first bazillion rounds, if you come out with ring rust... What?
There's only 4 spots in this first qualifier.
Yeah. So
right?
if you come out with ring rust, like you might just be thinking about qualifier 2 before you know it.
Better hope that Rhyme synergized with this team in a hurry. Smiley face.
Right?
Hope those scrims are going real well. The Scrimbucks conversion rate translates. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. There is a Nerd Street Gamers article if you want to know more about what's going on with VCT Stage 1 Challengers, specifically outlining the format changes for North America. You can find that on nerdstreet.com under the news section. So be sure to check that one out if you've got any questions, because tournament formats are screwy, and we know about that. That's just how they work. It's always a little bit confusing until you actually see a dang bracket. That's the way my brain works. Whenever someone's trying to describe a tournament bracket to me with words as opposed to just showing me a bracket, it's like just the little monkey with the cymbals clapping. That's my brain. All right. One other thing to talk about for VCT EMEA is we're wrapping up here. Don't want to take too much of your time here, Anderzz, but we got the EMEA groups, and they look pretty spicy. Group A, Gambit, Liquid,
one of them
Big,
looks
FPX.
spicy.
Now, okay, here's my question. I want to see if I agree or disagree with you, because I know which one I think looks spicy. Anderzz, which one do you think looks spicy?
I think that Group B it's a group of death. It is 100% a group of death.
Okay.
Like, depending on who... I mean, we know who the CIS second qualifier is. It's Na'Vi locked in, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Has that happened
Have
yet?
Na'Vi locked it in?
I think that happened. They beat 5 Spokes. I am 85% sure that CIS Q2 winner is
CIS
not locked.
Challengers 2. Yep, not as sincere.
That is Na'Vi. So right now, Group A is literally CIS cannibalizing each other in Gambit, FPX, and Na'Vi, and that's that group. It's like CIS versus Team Liquid. Cool. The second group though is like you've got Turkey cannibalizing itself, but then you've got 2 high performers from Champions, Guild, who is the team in Europe who won the offseason the hardest, and G2 trying to make something of themselves. That is a recipe for insane rivalries, crazy matches that have high impact to these teams' reputations. Because, like, it's just going to be a bloodbath. Like, I don't know how you could put it's hard to put 2 Champions teams in any of these groups, but to put Fnatic and Ascend in the same group, followed by Guild, followed by G2, like, just with those 4 teams, that is already exciting to me.
My hot take, I think Group A is going to be really spicy to watch too, but that's probably my CIS love showing.
I was going to say, you love
world.
CIS teams.
I do. They're good. They're good at the shoot games. They are. Gambit, I mean, frankly, Gambit choked champs and probably should have been our first Champions winner. But, that's my hot take. So I think that Gambit consistently... I think that Ascend's ceiling is perhaps higher because of that insane superstar factor, but I think that I look at Gambit as being a consistent powerhouse. Liquid, I think, should be there. Again, they're very reliant on some of the star power, but I think that they can bring that fire. I don't know how I feel about FPX or Big, but I think that's going to be an interesting group. But looking at it through the lens that you've portrayed, I understand why Group B is going to be the spicy drama.
The way I see it is Group A is going to be a battle between Gambit and TL for the first slot.
Yeah.
Look at Group B and tell me who's battling for the first slot, and the answer is half of them.
Yeah. Fair. I think that... Yeah. Top-heavy Group A, much more open Group B. That makes sense to me now.
My hot take is that Riot is completely... they're working behind the scenes here because they just wanted G2 and Fnatic in the same group so they could get all the League fanboys in watching Valorant. They can boost that EMEA viewership, get that rivalry going nice and early in the year.
I mean, look, G2 will put up a brilliant Twitter game about how they're going to stomp Fnatic and all this stuff, and then they'll also have some brilliant memes for when they get wrecked and go out 0-6 in the group, or 0-5 in the group, I guess it would be. So yeah, that one should be fun to watch. Newly mixed-well-less G2. See if they can bring a little heat.
Yeah.
I am very excited to watch that start. And then the other thing that's going on is the VRLs, the regional leagues, which Sam is casting one of those now. But there's some weirdness with these regional leagues.
A lot of weirdness.
Some growing pains of figuring out how these are actually supposed to work. Here's the one big thing that was bumping around Valorant Twitter. Team makes it to the league and then loses their spot because they don't have a Spanish org.
Yeah, I feel like every single week we get on for Press 4 to Defuse, and there's new drama in EMEA where Riot is just desperately trying to keep orgs involved, and somebody gets screwed over because Riot didn't think this through in EMEA, right? Like, I feel, hasn't that happened like 3 or 4 times already, off these first 2 qualifiers?
I know we had this conversation about the Spanish League when it first came out, because it's super bizarre, because the Spanish League, despite the fact that it is a Spanish league, covers multiple countries.
Right.
But the orgs are only supposed to be from Spain, which is just, so Italy is part of that league. It's part of that VRL region, but it didn't have the same inclusion. Like, being an Italian organization doesn't qualify in the same way that being a Spanish organization does, which to me is just, if you're included in the same umbrella, why the hell is there a difference of where your investment comes from within that umbrella? It's just bizarre to me. It's very bizarre. And so now the Italian org is going to have to buy the slot from the Spanish org that their players earned. It's weird.
It's so weird.
It feels like a structure that's set up to give certain people a payday, which feels very suspect from the outside.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. Is it feels like a system that's configured in a way to let organizations cash out when they shouldn't necessarily be entitled to it.
What I don't understand about it, and I get that different countries have different esports scenes, yada yada yada. Surely there's some sort of standard format that you can apply to a handful of European countries, right? Or European regions that is standard across those different leagues. Why does each one need to have a different distribution platform or network or figuring out how to dole out the spots? That is immediately opening yourselves up to weird corruption and conflicts of interest and bizarre formats and that kind of thing. I do not understand how Riot is like, we're not gonna standardize this at all. We're just each one's gonna figure it out and fuck it.
At least start with a standard, and then you can adapt regionally from there if issues come up, right? Like, at least say, hey, this is our blanket format, and then do the... I mean, you know, Riot's done that in the... That's all they've done with Valorant, is gone, hey, here's what we're going to do, and then people say, hey, that doesn't work for us, and then they adjust it. Why aren't they doing that this time? Why is this the one time where they're like, each individual cog in the wheel is going to turn in a different way and be all weird? Obviously, like, you know, we're missing our resident EMEA superfan in Sam right now to talk about like the specifics in depth. But even as, you know, an NA guy across the ocean, even surface level, it just seems so uncomfortable.
It's one of those things where if on first describing the format, your immediate reaction is, that seems pretty fucky. It's probably like, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, you know?
It's
like,
not getting
if
better
your
from there.
First read to a format is, this feels like it was set up to help one or, you know, several people in particular. It probably was. They didn't do a good job of sort of hiding their hand or their intentions, I don't think. It's a weird look. It's a weird smack to introducing a new tournament format. Doesn't sit right with me. Really doesn't sit right. But I think this is going to wrap up our show today on the subject of not sitting right. I plugged him once before, but if you don't follow Anderzz on Twitter or on YouTube, you should do both those things now. He has valid and important commentary on esports things. He'll be announcing some sort of move to some sort of a role with some sort of a
coaching
team
of some variety
region.
with some people somewhere.
Yeah, he's just gonna be a life coach now. Just life coach.
I'm going into
Anderzz.
motivational speaking, actually.
Bro, can I hire you for that? I
mean,
need a life coach.
If you do that, then you can coach T1 next. That's how that works, right?
I'm not touching that.
Anyway, Yeah, so follow Anderzz on Twitter, follow him on YouTube, keep up with the videos. Tune in next week for more Press 4 to Defuse at 1 p.m. Eastern, and presumably the VCT bracket's going to be coming out very shortly, so keep an eye out for that. VCT starts tomorrow! NA VCT, woo! Time to watch the massacre. Just throw it in the background and watch your favorite teams get eliminated. Hell yeah! Woo! Valorant's back! All right, that's going to wrap up our show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye, everyone!